So look what we got today. $181. I'm really not familiar with this particular line of saw, but I did just do a tune-up on this one, and after 4 tanks, it locked. Shucks. So what I do know about the 181 is it's more or less like a 288, 281 or 288. There's not a whole lot of differences, supposedly. So, one thing that you notice about this is there's no decompression valve. So this is generally kind of tricky to pull over. But this is pretty well locked, so I don't know what happened. What I did to it is I put a carburetor kit in here and a new fuel line, and I don't really see anything wrong with either. The carburetor bolts are indeed tight. I've checked that. So let's go through it, see what happened, see what kind of damage we're looking at, see what troubleshooting we can do. Let's take the air filter off first. Two big flathead screws, and these are washable air filters. So need to get a box. So I know the fuel line's good. I've checked the carburetor bolts to make sure that they're tight. Again, you can check them. So it's not, the carburetor bolts didn't come loose and develop an air leak. Can't check compression because it's locked. Nice tannish chocolatey color there, so that's not bad. So the spark plug isn't too hot. I don't think this got cooked. So, which kind of leads me to believe there might be some internal injury here, which unfortunately means I got to take off the muffler first and see if I can see any injury. Looks like 8mm bolts, and they're a little loose. So it looks like three 8mm bolts and one M4 on the side here. This is probably a case bolt. Yep. For now, I'm going to put the case bolt back in. Well, we definitely have a scored cylinder. Crap. Wonder why. I really don't like doing pressure and vac tests, but probably would be a good idea here. So let's do pressure and vac tests. This bracket off because we don't need it. First thing we got to do is block off. That's one of the problems. How am I going to do a pressure and vac test on this without being able to pressurize? There's no impulse line here that I can pressurize. It basically has to be one of the seals. So if you want to do a pressure and vac test on this, you actually have to have an adapter that goes in the spark plug hole to pressurize. Clutch cover. Might as well get rid of the top handle. It's kind of in our way. Two screws there. Look like wood screws. About 1 inch long each. Same thing for the bottom. So they all go into plastic. They're all the same. That's convenient. And so I really need to investigate this and see if I did something wrong. Because if I did something wrong, then I owe my good buddy here a top end. That's the thing. If you're doing a $50 tune-up, you can end up into a $200 top end in a hurry. Well, if we're doing a pressure and vac test, I'm really going to want everything else off, so let's take a bunch of this other stuff off, but I need my impact, so pause. Feels like 19mm on the clutch. Impact makes the most sense there. Don't know what this plastic thing is. Clutch needle. All looks quite clean, actually. The worm should come right out. The worm comes out. That looks like an okay shape, and there does look like there's a washer inside there. That does mate up nicely with that. Easiest way for me to keep these straight is with a zip tie. I guess we're going to take off the oiler. 3mm, 3 Allens. Looks very similar to the 394 oiler. Probably even the same length of screws, about 1 inch long. 2 screwdrivers, we just lift the oiler out. Gee, that's gunked up, huh? That bearing looks kind of gunked up too. I don't know, maybe it isn't so bad that we did this. Yeah, now we have got stuff in there. You basically have to do a full pull on this. And there's an O-ring around the outside here. So a bunch of places where you could have trouble. It makes doing a pressure and vac test kind of difficult just because I just removed that. I forgot that the seal was integral with the oiler. So get a close-up of that. The seal looks like it's flush to this surface on the oiler, and there's an O-ring around the outside here too. Ideally it would be good to replace that probably. And it looks like when we are putting the bearing in here, in this case half, we're going to want the oiler in to set the depth of the bearing. So just looking at that, you need new bearings anyway. That's all carboned up. It's kind of time. Still want to see exactly why this failed. So if you're going to do a pressure and vac test on this, don't remove the oiler first. That's the long and the short of that. Okay. Next, let's take the starter cover off. This is not an OEM screw. Just going to remove that. These all look like flat blades. I wonder if I can convert these over to the newer screws. So 4 screws. And the cover comes off. And these screws do fall out of their holes. They're not captured, so beware of that. They do appear to be M5. Pull off the air shroud. Clean that later. This does have the dual ignition, the 2 ignition coils. Don't know why they did that, but next I have to pull the flywheel off, and I think I'll pull these off first. They look like 8mm. There's a spring. Looks like there's a washer type piece in here, the pawl, and each screw. Now I need to get that nut off. I really want to heat up the flywheel a little bit to see if I can get it off. And that way I can actually see the seal here, and we can see whether it's leaking or not. 14mm looks like. Now there is a washer under these. It's some funny bent washer. Get rid of that. Now ideally, what a guy on my channel was mentioning was you really need something called a knocker, and that helps take this off a lot easier than, well, not having a knocker. But I don't have one yet. I have to make one. I know. I'll do it. I will. The skinny wire is the yellow. Chubby wire is the black. We can put those out there. Then we can heat this up. Put this nut down basically flush with the top of the crank. What you're going to want to do is you're going to want to lift at the chubby part of the flywheel here. So when you lift at that part it's the heavier part, you're less likely to break a fin. Don't need too much, just a little bit of heat. PB blaster in there. Lift the whole thing up. There, and you can hear the sound change when it finally lets go. Careful, nut's hot. And the flywheel's probably kind of warm too. So the flywheel comes off. There's a Woodruff key on here. Small flat blade screwdriver. Comes out. If you lose the Woodruff key, the saw doesn't run. Now we can work on blocking off the intake and the exhaust. The second ignition coil here, we're going to take a couple of 3mm bolts out. Put the screws back here. So I don't lose them. The throttle linkage here just clicks out. And it flies. Might want to undo the idle screw a few turns, to get that out of the way. Pull the gas line off. Pinch it off with your hemostats. Let's undo these two bolts here. The flat blade right here for the air horn. Just basically secure the air horn. Choke, click this out. Find a piece of rubber that covers right between the two screws there. Now you can see that that's blocked off, and then you have to screw this back on down. Problem with this is this, of course, is not exactly an exact test either, because now we've altered something, you know. Darn partition doesn't want to sit in the right spot. What am I supposed to do? Actually, it looks like I can't even adjust it from there. So maybe I didn't do a bad thing, at least. I don't know. I'll have to take it off and look at it later again. Kind of an annoying piece, if you ask me. Okay, that's blocked. That should be sealed. Now we can work on sealing the exhaust. Oh, that'll do. And your exhaust is blocked. Now what we gotta do is figure out how to block here and inject pressure at the same time. So this is the Midivac 8500 kit, and it's a pretty good kit. This rubber piece, stuck it right in here. That should be able to go right like that. I really need to be able to rotate the crank. So hey, we got it unstuck. That's great. Now we should be able to pressurize the whole crankcase because we got the piston moving, which also is going to help us remove the whole thing here in a bit. Truth is, I really need a spark plug there. That's drilled out. You really need an adapter of some kind. Struggling with a couple of things right now. One is getting to pressurize this chamber. You really need a adapter there for your spark plug. But I don't have one made up, so I'm trying to figure out how to make one. And I have this adapter, which actually goes in. This is actually for my compression tester. And as luck would have it, that works. There's just it's a brass 1/4 inch adapter, and it's like a repair coupling, and it's just in my box here of air stuff. Sure enough, it actually fits. Personally, I think that's pretty cool and lucky. Now that's tight there. I don't know if the thread pitch and whatnot is exact, but it seems to be close enough. And this seems to go into here. It's got an O-ring on it, so it'll seal okay. And the next problem that I have is my Midivac is moving. I'm not able to generate any pressure. Ah, now we're actually holding pressure. So my Midivac needs a tune-up, but indeed we are losing pressure, but it's staying there long enough, hopefully, for me to give this a better examination. A little bit of WD-40 on the seals. this a little bit. So long story short, I don't see a break in the seals here. The seals are not what killed this. The base gasket looks fine. There's your main leak right there. Slow leak there at my adapter, but I don't see a leak elsewhere. So the long and the short of this is I can't figure out where the leak is. Or, more better put, I can't figure out exactly what's wrong with this to cause it to have scored. So, at least there doesn't appear to be a leak, an air leak here that's bad enough to cause it to have scored. There's no leak around the base gasket. There's really no leak at the seals. There might be a small leak at the external seal here, but whatever it is, it's really, really small. So I don't know why this scored. I'm thinking that maybe when it gets hot, one of the seals opens up. It's entirely possible, especially because it's because the seals are so hard and they're so old. So that may be the case. It's most likely the case at this point. So I guess I have to do a full teardown here. Yeah, I'll just do a full teardown and rebuild. That's all we're going to do. So let's get to it. Muffler comes back off.